started. I'm so. Good, good. Yeah. But anyway. I'll be able to do it.
Testing. Madam Recording Secretary, are we ready to start the meeting?
Yes, Chair Vega, the meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the December 14, 2023 Santa Ana Police Oversight Commission regular meeting to order. The time is 5:11 p.m. This meeting is taking place with in-person attendance at City Hall in the council chambers. The public can also watch the meeting online via the Santa Ana YouTube channel or city's website. Madam Recording Secretary, can you please conduct a roll call?
Thank you, Chair Vega. Commissioner Castillo-Lawton,
Here.
Commissioner Goransky, Commissioner Mejia,
Here.
Commissioner Perea,
Here.
Commissioner Said, Vice Chair Carpenter,
Here.
Chair Vega.
Here.
Record show all 7 members present.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is a Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Said, can you please do us the honors and lead us into the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, Commissioner. Next on the agenda is public comments. Now is the time for the commission to receive comments from the public on agenda and non-agenda items. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the commission may not enter into discussion at this time. Speakers will have 3 minutes for their comments. Madam Recording Secretary, is there anyone that wishes to speak in person?
Chair Vega, we do not have any speakers for this meeting.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment section. Moving on to the consent calendar. Item 1 is minutes from the November 9th, 2023 Police Oversight Commission meeting. The recommended action is to approve the meetings. Would any commissioners like to make a motion to approve the meetings from that, the minutes for that meeting?
I'll approve it.
Motion by Vice Chair Carpenter. Do I hear a second? Second by Commissioner Korinsky. Madam Recording Secretary, can you please do roll call?
Motion to approve the minutes moved by Vice Chair Carpenter, seconded by Commissioner Goransky. Commissioner Castillo-Lawton,
Yes.
Commissioner Goransky. Oh, Commissioner Goransky. Commissioner Mejia,
Yes.
Commissioner Perea,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes, thank you.
Vice Chair Carpenter,
Yes.
Chair Vega.
Yes.
Motion approved by unanimous consent.
Thank you. Great. That's the end of the consent calendar. Moving on to the business calendar. Item number 2 is to discuss upcoming training on the internal police department procedures. Acting Deputy Chief Gonzalez, do we have a presentation?
Thank you, Chair Vega, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity. Yes, I forgot about the back. We presented the 2-day oversight training that was proposed to the entire commission. I believe it was emailed to all of you. It's also attached to the actual agenda. And what you see here is a very robust training on all aspects of law enforcement as required per the ordinance. As I mentioned during our meeting last time, this training can be tailored to your needs. If you'd like more of something, less of something, let us know. Our only concern obviously is making sure that the training meets the requirements as outlined in the ordinance. But like I said, I'm open for discussion, questions on the agenda. These timelines here are generally placed by our training folks. That's their experience on how long it takes generally to go through those items. And like I said, as it sits right now, it does appear to be a 2-day training. And like I said, we can facilitate that training at the request of the entire commission.
Okay, thank you, Acting Deputy Chief. Before I open it up for discussion, I know that we're all going to have questions regarding the training schedule and what, if any options we have of how that may look like. Does anyone have any specific questions or comments in regards to the topics listed on the course outline? So the topics itself? Hearing none, then let's go ahead and discuss what this training schedule is going to look like. So I'll go ahead and start. I'm sure that commissioners probably are thinking about the same question: is there a possibility to do 4-hour day sessions, virtual versus in person? Is there any part of the training that can be done virtual?
I believe there are sections of the training that do lend themselves so that we can do them over, Zoom or any other platform that's available. There are some training components in here, for example, the scenario-based trainings that are generally better facilitated in person. We also have, simulators that we would like to obviously run the commission through so that you can kind of get that bird's eye, real life training experience that the officers go through. So to really kind of help you understand what the officer goes through when they're making decisions on a variety of topics. So we can adjust and tailor as needed. Going through Zoom and doing courses like that, we can. Like I said, we put the times here so that we can take blocks and chunks and move them wherever you need to fit your guys' schedule.
Thank you for that.
Commissioners, I apologize, if you will, allow me just to interject here briefly. What we have to be careful with, and it's something that my training is going to touch on a little bit, is the parameters of the Brown Act itself. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that if we are all gathering together and there's more than a quorum, we are theoretically entering into what would be considered a meeting. And once a meeting is triggered, we have to understand that public engagement is going to be necessary. So to the extent that Zoom or something remote may be a possibility, I'm not foreclosing that as an option, but we would have to work with staff to figure out if there is a way to essentially create an open forum whereby the public has the ability to engage and we're also in some virtual platform. I don't know if that's a possibility, but it's something we'd have to look into. I would just caution again that if we are looking into a virtual type training space, but everybody is going to be present, all the commissioners will be present, the majority's there, there's a dialogue happening. Theoretically, there's city business being discussed. We have now a meeting. And so we are going to be subject to the parameters of the Brown Act. That's why, Mr. Soto had brought up, I think at the last meeting, this idea of a special session where we may need to tailor this via multiple special sessions for the timelines that everybody can agree on, or I guess I should say the majority can agree on, because yes, the idea that we're all going to come here at 5 o'clock and be here for an 8-hour stretch each day is probably not realistic. So to the extent virtual is not a possibility, we'll really need to look into the idea of these special sessions and chopping those sessions down into like manageable chunks.
I do have a question. I fully appreciate that if we're gathered as a group, it constitutes a meeting. My question would be, can this be done on an individual basis? Because I see like this simulator training, obviously we all can't be in the simulator at one time. Is that a possibility, just so that we can kind of expedite things? Because I understand people have varied schedules, so if that's a possibility.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. I would defer a little bit on this. From a legal aspect, there's there's no prohibition on the idea that, I don't want to call it canned training, because this is not going to be canned training. I know from our PD, this is going to be very robust and it's going to be very thorough and detailed. So if there were a pre-made training, in essence, that were just, you could go online and click play and watch it from your home, that would not invoke the Brown Act and we would not have meeting issues. That said, that's not my place. I would defer to acting deputy chief on that matter because it's his department who's going to be putting on this training, and to the extent that they want this to be a more in-person, a more in-depth, robust gathering that is going to allow the commissioners to really see and understand what's going on with at PD from a ground level, that's going to be a determination for PD to make.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a clarifying question. So what I'm hearing is that even if we were to have this in person, we would still be having this as quorum, right? So would it have to be public then? And if so, then obviously we need to find an alternative time because 5 p.m. wouldn't work. But I am wondering, what are your suggestions, like from the legal aspect, so that we know what options we can actually have for in-person sessions, or is your response calling it a special session, like that's the solution to it?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So what essentially would have to happen is if all the commissioners are meeting in one space and there is a majority present, that is going to trigger the Brown Act, and it would have to be a public forum, much like this. It would have to be broadcast. It would have to have the availability for public comment, everything that would be covered under the Brown Act. Everything we're doing right here is what would have to happen for those particular trainings. A special session is just a non-regularly scheduled session. So when we got the agenda, when you all received the agenda a few days back or a week back, it already scheduled the next regular meeting. I think it set it for January 11th. A special session would occur outside of that. It would be, I'm just making this up, but it would be January 18th, right? Instead of the 11th. That's a special session, not one that's regularly scheduled. If that answers your question, Commissioner.
No, does the special section have to be public, I guess is my question.
Yes, the special session would be public.
And then I guess I have a question for the chief. Then is there an issue with the trainings being public then? Will we encounter any issues?
To the extent that our policies can be taught in a public forum, I don't think that's an issue because our policies right now are actually posted online. The content within that, if there are areas that are sensitive, our officers will be cognizant of that. We'll, probably tailor those areas back. But just to kind of give you all some perspective here, having the training together, because I know there was issues or there were some suggestions to move it around to separate times. I think it's more beneficial to do it as a group, do it in a meeting so that you can ask questions, we can engage, because a lot of the training, for example, the use of force really tries to utilize open-ended questions, trying to invoke some critical thinking skills, because that's what we do with our officers, right? We don't make decisions in a vacuum, and trying to create an environment, a training environment where you can kind of experience some of the things that the officers have to go through when they make their final decisions to act is beneficial. It'll be beneficial for you all when you start reviewing, the content that's going to come before the commission. So to the extent that it would be beneficial, I would recommend doing it via the special sessions here in public, and we will be 100% cognizant. If there's any sensitivities, we'll probably scale back on those. But again, all of our policies are online, and there's really nothing for us to hide. We're going to be teaching you, in essence, what we teach the officers from the policy standpoint.
And I have a question with that. So then the special meetings that we will absolutely need, those still have the structure of having public comments available and obviously be open to the public, right? Even special meetings, we need to have space for public comments.
Chair Vega, thank you for your question. Yes, any meeting, regular meeting or special meeting, and again, special meeting just means a public meeting that's scheduled outside of your recurring twice a month on the second Thursday at 5 p.m. Wherever those meetings are taking place, they must, and they will be available to the public. So you'll still have an agenda. There'll still be an opportunity for public comments. The place must always be physically accessible to the public for anyone to come in and attend and participate in the meeting by viewing your public discussions. What our police department is proposing for this training will be open and available to the public. Will be agendized on our website. We'll also physically print agendas outside of our facilities for folks that want to see it. And any printed agenda documents that accompany the agenda, the packet will also be available to the public.
I think, and I just kind of want to clarify a point, commissioners, is this, that what we're really looking at when we're talking about whether the public has to be present, whether there has to be the public participation is, but the operative question is there a meeting? And what constitutes a meeting is a majority of this body being in one space together, be it virtual or live. It doesn't matter. If a majority of this body is present in one space, then technically a meeting is occurring. So if that were to occur, then the public would have to have the ability to participate and attend. So 4 of you were getting lunch at In-N-Out. Technically, that's a meeting. And so the public would have to have all the same accessibility and access for participation that they enjoy here. So really, when you think about it, does the public have to attend? Does the public not have to attend? It's really about asking yourself, are we engaged in a meeting right now? And if we are, then the public has to be there.
And
Under very limited circumstances, we've talked about closed session, but barring those that limited narrow carve out, it would be a meeting. The public has to be there.
And would the training be held here or at the police department?
I think from the technological capabilities and needs for the meeting, it would probably be facilitated here. And again, for situations where we wanted to utilize our simulator so to run you through a use of force options portion, we'd probably have to come up with a plan so that we're not violating Brown Act to enable all of you to go through that training while making sure that we're following the law. But we would probably do it here, just like any other council meeting where they're making presentations via PowerPoint and engaging. It's a training session, so we'll engage the commissioners, to get some of your feedback and so that you can ask your questions.
Go ahead, Commissioner Perea.
Thank you, Acting Chief and City Attorney for your guidance. And thank you for everyone for asking the questions. I think now that we've been discussing this issue of scheduling, just so that everyone else were kind of like I'm leaning towards too is if it requires to have multiple special sessions for us in the period of January, I think it will be very beneficial, not just as the commission to go through the trainings together, especially here, so we can have those Zoom capabilities, but also in the interest of the public, so that they understand the type of trainings that we are receiving, and also so that they also get to see, the discussion or questions that we have from ourselves. I think that given that this commission is of big interest, not just to us, but also to the community at large, I think it will be very beneficial for us to hold this over a period of perhaps 3-4 different special sessions. I know these are the long 2 days, and maybe we can start thinking about how we can break those down, and in the evenings. That will be my preference. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may interject, then in that case, and I agree with you, then I propose that instead of spending 20 minutes trying to figure out each other's schedule, that we request staff to send us a survey similar to what they did before, and taking into account some of the options that we have, if we're able to break them down to 4-hour sessions, and then based off of the feedback that the commissioners make, direct staff to go ahead and make some special meetings in the month of January. Staff, is this something that you will be able to do by the end of the month?
Thank you, Chair Vega. Administratively, I can certainly send out a survey or gather your availability to schedule these training sessions. What I'll need to secure and confirm trainings is to make sure that I receive responses from the commission, individual responses. And then I will confer with the police department staff to confirm their availability. And then we'll go ahead and schedule out. Yes.
Okay, the commissioners,
I had a follow-up question.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Later, clearly this is a very important training, the use of force, because that's probably where a lot of public complaints come from. It seems to me that'd be rather difficult to reproduce that here in the council chambers. Am I correct?
Yes, we utilize technology that takes up an entire room. So to the extent that we're going to be able to bring that to the public, it's very unlikely.
That was my
Yeah,
next
I
question
don't,
to-
that's a portion that we probably won't be able to do because I mean, the equipment and the technology that we use literally takes up an entire classroom, maybe about half the size of this room here. And so we would have to just make arrangements to put everyone through the training without violating the Brown Act.
Exactly. That was my question. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Happens if there's a-
Thank you, Commissioner Castillo-Lawton. I'm not sure what you mean by conflict, but we can hold a meeting so long as there is a quorum of the commission. So long as four or more commissioners are present, our meetings, whether regular or special, can continue. That's why I am going to check with each of you individually to gather your availability and do my best to schedule times when all of you are available. You all, were nominated and appointed to this commission. And we are very grateful for your time and service and appreciate you making yourselves available for these meetings, for these trainings and our ongoing meetings. And Deputy Chief has a comment.
I would, just a follow-up comment is, to the extent any of the commissioners are not able to attend a meeting, especially these trainings, remember that all of these meetings are broadcast, they're filmed and they're recorded. So if a commissioner were in a position where they had to miss a meeting, they will all be stored on the city council website and they're accessible. And Mr. Soto can answer this, but they date back years upon years. So not that anybody would wait that long, I would hope. But if you miss a meeting, you can easily tune in the next day to YouTube, pull it up and watch it, jot down some questions potentially and forward them along to staff or to acting deputy chief's attention, and those questions can be addressed.
And we don't mind holding a separate training for someone if they weren't able to make it. We just recommend that everyone be there together so that everyone can have the experience of hearing everyone's questions, hearing the responses at one time versus piecemeal together. But we're more than willing to be flexible if someone can't make it to provide that training outside of the normal meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. The training could be, I don't know if it's so much made up as you can participate or at least watch it, and you could catch up on what it is that you missed. With regard to the timeline, I should note that the ordinance only provides that you commissioners shall receive training within, I believe, 90 days. The ordinance does not specify or mandate that training be completed within 90 days. So, our position here, I know staff's position is we are putting forth good faith efforts to train you commissioners in a very robust, good faith manner. All the topics that were prescribed within the ordinance, and we will be beginning that within 90 days, and it'll be rolling. And so to the extent that it maybe exceeds 90 days, it's probably likely, but again, the ordinance says that you shall receive training within 90 days. I'm not aware of any such prohibition or any cap within the Brown Act.
Okay, any additional comments or questions? Staff, do we have clear direction, or do we need to take a vote on anything?
Thank you, Chair Vega. No vote is needed. This was just a discussion item, and the feedback and direction that I've received is to follow up with each of you individually, gather your availability, and schedule training sessions in the month of January. And I will update you as 4 training sessions during the month of January.
Excuse me, just to clarify, you guys wanted to do 4-hour blocks, or did you guys want more flexibility than that?
If we only have to receive training within 90 days, then I mean, I'm open to a smaller chunk of having it spread beyond January, but I don't know how other people feel.
Can that be added to the survey maybe and see what the commissioners say? How they respond?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioner. We can certainly extend the scheduling period past January. That's not a problem.
I have a comment. I was under the impression, and maybe I'm wrong, that we are not able to look at any complaints that are submitted unless we have all the training. Is that correct? Like, would that prohibit us from looking at anything?
Thank you, Commissioner Mejia. The ordinance establishing the Police Oversight Commission does not require that the commission or commissioners have completed the trainings that are outlined in the ordinance prior to you conducting your business as outlined in the ordinance. Some of those responsibilities include what I think you may be referring to, such as working through your independent oversight director to review allegations of misconduct and other items.
I have a follow-up question for the chief. Rather than us dictating that time frame, it would seem to me it would be better if you said, hey, look, we need 3 hours to complete this piece, or we need 4 hours, rather than saying, hey, we got 4 hours and we cut something short. Or does that make sense? You know, so you can have it actually complete a X amount of training in the time, you know, that you can allot, rather than saying, hey, we got 4 hours, you got to cram it in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and that's why we included the times here, so that we can kind of compartmentalize and add however many sessions we can to those blocks. If you have 2 hours available on this particular date, we will include, we'll pick the training sessions that are an hour long and pick a couple of them so that we can get through. If you all want to do 4-hour blocks, we'll put in 4 hours worth based on the timelines that are outlined in the training agenda that you were provided.
A quick follow-up question on that. Is there a sequence you feel that should be followed on this? Because like, if we break the training up into time slots that accommodate the members of the committee, some I see are a half hour, some are 2 hours, some are 1 hour. So is there a sequence that we need to follow, or is it possible to rearrange that to accommodate?
I believe we can rearrange. I like the sequence that's here first, because like I said, the use of force is generally the big topic that everyone generally sees on the news, and you get a lot of reaction out of use of force incidents. But certainly we can tailor this however the commission needs. It's relatively simple, because I think the biggest chunks are really 2-hour chunks.
Mhm.
Everything else is broken down into about an hour or so. You see in the back where it has 23 hours for
Mhm.
scenarios.
Mhm.
We can break that down. We can facilitate that to the needs of the commission, because again, maybe you don't need 23 hours, and we can tailor that down to maybe, a couple of 2-hour sessions just to really test and go through the knowledge that you were taught, to see if you guys had grasped it. And if we need to touch up on stuff, we can be available for that as well.
I understand. I would like to make the motion that we do follow the schedule that's laid out, because obviously you know how the training should run. If we can do that, I think that would be the best. And I think that said, that we need to accommodate, either we need to commit to a 4-hour block or an 8-hour block or whatever it is we're going to do, rather than try and piecemeal this around and, do one piece here, one piece there, 2 hours here, 2 hours there. In my experience, it's best to get at least 4 hours in. 2 hours is kind of a waste of time, quite frankly. That's just my opinion, so I'll put that out to the members.
Yeah, the survey will include options for doing 4-hour or 8-hour training sessions, right? That's all we're really asking.
What I can do, I think I used a similar model when I reached out to each of you individually to schedule our recurring meeting schedule. I looked at available time blocks over several hour periods, and looked at times where your availability matched. And in the instance of scheduling your recurring meeting, it was looking at least a 2-hour time block. I can do something very similar. I'll send out availability to forecast out for the month of January, February. I can even go out further because we still have additional trainings to come. I'll look at your overlapping availability. There may be times where you may have overlapping availability for an hour, 2 hours, 2.5, 5 hours. I don't know, but those individual results that you submit back to me will let me know. So I need information from all of you individually to then confer with our staff to find out what the best way and time is to schedule these trainings for you. Our staff are our professional experts on this subject matter, and they'll be able to provide the best recommendation back to the commission to confirm how we're going to schedule these trainings. And once those are set, I will work with our recording secretary and we will schedule special meetings, assuming or referring to these meeting times that fall outside of the regular meetings, the first or the second Thursday of every month, and we will go from there.
Okay, I think that sounds good. I think we're going to close comments. Thank you, Acting Deputy Chief Gonzalez. Let's go ahead and move on to the next item. Next item is to receive training relating to the Ralph Brown Act. Assistant City Attorney Martinez.
Thank you, Chair Vega. Waiting for a PowerPoint. Mr. Soto's kindly putting up on the screen for me. So as we discussed at the last meeting, and I know there was considerable interest on this topic, I wanted to put something together for the commission regarding the Ralph M. Brown Act. And I know you've all heard a lot of talk about the Brown Act, compliance with the Brown Act. When is the Brown Act invoked? When is it triggered? The Brown Act is a body of law, like we discussed, and it governs how all public meetings should occur, the conduct of public officials, and a myriad of other issues that may kind of fall under this umbrella, if you will, of open government. So with that said, we've put together a little training here. This in no way constitutes a complete overview of the Brown Act. That would be a treatise level review, and it would potentially take as long as the PD training. So this is kind of a broad strokes training that is going to touch on what I would call some of the biggest pitfalls that commissioners or any public official could find themselves in. And just with regard to kind of, like I said, overarching concepts and principles that would apply to these public bodies. So just some disclaimers here right off the bat. This information is for commissioner training purposes. Please do not construe it as legal advice. And that is just a friendly lawyer disclaimer that we have to do every time we are saying anything that may be construed as legal advice. I have 3 goals for you commissioners this evening. I want to explain the open and public nature of these meetings. My second goal is to discuss the meeting procedures. And my third goal with you all tonight would be to strategize on how to implement best practices moving forward. As I said, the Ralph M. Brown Act is a California law originally adopted in 1953. If you really had to boil down the Brown Act into just one neat little sentence, it's that all meetings shall be open in public. Remember, all meetings shall be open in public, except when the Brown Act authorizes otherwise. You can think of this as the government being a house made of glass walls. The curtains may be drawn only to further the public interest. And that's an important concept, is that this idea of closed session, which we've talked about now many times in its limited circumstances, closed session is not to further the interest of the body, this body. It's not to further the interest of an individual commissioner. It's to further the public interest. So when there are the circumstances whereby it would actually benefit the public for what you all would discuss, for that to be in private, and it fits the narrow exceptions, then we draw the curtains and we can have a closed session discussion. Okay. And so this was kind of what I touched on when we were speaking earlier is, you know, the first operative question I think that we're really asking, especially from an open government perspective and when the Brown Act is going to trigger, is what is a meeting? What constitutes a meeting? And here we have a nice little synopsis that a meeting is any gathering of a majority of members to hear or discuss any item of city business or potential city business. And like I said, the space is irrelevant. It could be virtual. It could be here in this formal dais. It could be down the street at In-N-Out. It could be at somebody's house. The space is irrelevant. It could be on the phone. It could be on the telephone. It's that are a majority of you commissioners getting together in one space where the potential for city business could be discussed. And that's what constitutes a meeting. Yes, Vice Chair.
A quick question on that. That would include email also, just to be clear. If 3 of us are emailing or 4 of us are emailing back and forth on a subject, would that constitute a meeting also, correct?
Yes, that would
Thank you.
fall probably more under what I'm going to touch on, which is called a serial meeting. So a serial meeting is not where, and I'll get to this, but it's not where everybody's in one space. It's where one piece of communication is moving forward amongst the group and it's spreading that way. Yes, Commissioner. Technically, that is true. The general best practices, though, is to just not put yourself in that space. So, for instance, there is one exception to the meeting requirement under the Brown Act, and there's many exceptions, but one of the exceptions is ceremonial events, right? So if there were groundbreaking somewhere in the city of a new building, right? And all 7 of you were to attend. That's a ceremonial event, and that would be an exception, again, provided you don't discuss city business. So there is an argument to be made, well, if 5 of us are meeting, but we're really not talking about business, is that a meeting? Some may argue, no, it's not, but the optically, you don't necessarily want to put yourself in that position either, because from an optic standpoint, it's very likely that perhaps you were discussing city business. So really what we try to say from a best practices standpoint is if a majority is present, it's a meeting, right? And it's going to be subject. Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't be.
If 4 commissioners found themselves present in a grocery store, first of all, the intent wasn't there for there to be a meeting. And secondly, it would not be considered a meeting, but my recommendation would be to say hi, friendly, and disband as quickly as possible, if that makes sense. So again, when we have that majority of members of this body present, it's going to trigger, it's going to constitute a meeting, and it's going to trigger the Brown Act, which requires notice, an agenda, and a time for public comment. Right? So that's what we have here. We have that the notice went out, the agenda went out. There was the opportunity for public comment. Nobody chose to exercise that, but it was available nevertheless. And I touched on this, that unless a majority gathering falls into one of the Brown Act's exceptions, it will be considered a meeting subject to the act. Meetings subject to the Brown Act are not limited to face-to-face gatherings. We've talked about this idea of any communication or device through which a majority of the body discusses, deliberates, or takes action on a business item outside of a notice meeting. Vice Chair, you mentioned emails is here, text messages, social media, or other messages. You know, we're in a virtual world now. You got Zoom, you have, like I said, social media, just the ability for you all to share your ideas with just the stroke of a few fingers and hitting send is there. And so we have to just be really cognizant of, you know, are the commissioners putting themselves in any position whereby you're sharing your ideas and your opinions together, where there's more than a majority or a majority or more, and the public was not made aware of it. The public was not given the opportunity to show up virtually or in person and provide their comment. That's really what this all comes back to is, did we give the public notice, the ability to actually weigh in and provide their thoughts and opinions? Or was the commission just sharing their thoughts and opinions through other mediums? And that's what we have to be worried about.
I have a question in
Sure.
regards to that. So if you belong, like Facebook has groups, right? Let's suppose that we all belong to the same group and I share an opinion about something that I would like change in the police department. They're all part of the group, but they didn't chime in the conversation. Is that considered a violation?
Is your Facebook profile, is it public?
Yes.
Off the top of my head, that probably would not be a violation of the Brown Act.
Now, if they like my comment, my post, that could be a violation then at that point, because they're kind of agreeing to what I'm saying.
Yeah, they're in a sense sharing their own thoughts and opinions as to it, but there's no prohibition for, and this is where, again, we're gonna get to serial meetings this way. There's no prohibitions for on Chair Vega, you picking up the phone and calling Vice Chair Carpenter. Okay, and you guys can discuss items. You can discuss business. The issue and the problem becomes then when, and this is all hypothetical, please no, I'm not singling anybody out. When Vice Chair Carpenter contacts Commissioner Said and says, you know, Chair Vega feels this way about it, and I agree, and I think you should get on board with this too. And then Commissioner Said contacts Commissioner Mejia and relays that too. Because now what we've effectively created is this serial meeting. It's a chain and it's taking off like wildfire. And so that would constitute a meeting. And so that, again, in the hypothetical that you presented, Chair Vega, is liking something the same as what we're describing here? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, there's a debate. A lot of these things aren't like a clear line, bright line rule, right? But one of the things I first asked myself is your Facebook profile open to the public? Or is this a little group you have that is made up of 20 people, and 4 of the people of those 20 are commissioners here on this board? And then you're sharing ideas within that narrow space that's blocked out the public. That's problematic.
Yeah, the space that I'm talking about is like it's an open forum where anyone can read what I post or what any member of the group posts.
I would not consider that a meeting.
Okay.
I would not consider that a meeting subject to the Brown Act.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody have any other questions? Yeah,
I have a
Commissioner
quick
Mejia?
question. So the conversation you were talking about being a serial meeting, that is very probable, right? Especially when you're having conversations, whether it's intentional or unintentional. How is that held accountable?
I'm sorry, can you clarify when you mean?
Yeah, so like,
held
for
account-
instance, the exact same scenario that you just mentioned where, one of the commissioners calls someone and then we have this change of thought process and sharing opinions. That's just like, I guess, how do you detect that, right? Because you shouldn't be doing that, but it's harder to prove. And so my question is, how do you prove those kind of conversations? Or like, what are the mechanisms in place to ensure that individuals are not doing that?
I think that one of the largest mechanisms in place is that the 7 of you were appointed by our city council members. They have great faith and trust in each one of you. And you're correct when you say it's very difficult to detect. I would be lying if I said that a lot of this did not come down to the honor system. Because how do you detect something like that? We don't have your cell phone wiretapped. We don't have access to your emails. So a lot of this is an honor system type situation. To the extent that it is ever detected, I would guess that that it's probably largely detected by way of admissions that somebody makes or discloses to another member. In my hypothetical, if Vice Chair Carpenter contacted Commissioner Said and said what I, hypothetically said that he told me, if Commissioner Said were to come forward to this body and say, this is what's happening, that would lead to potentially an investigation and an inquiry, and we may find out more about it. The result of which, it would certainly be reported to council. And at that point, it would be, go up to a council decision. The other thing to consider is that if a decision was made on an item, and if a decision was made on an item that may have been a result of an improper serial meeting, whatever action may have occurred on that item could be voidable. If that was the prevailing, result, right? Because of the serial meeting, if that side won, if you will, that action could be voidable. If it were proven. That answer your question, Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you for
Yes,
clarifying.
Commissioner Perez?
That's might not be related to the Brown Act, but what you just mentioned, pique my curiosity on Public Requests Act, the Public Request Act, is our commissioners' communication subject to that?
That is an interesting question, and I believe that the commissioners' personal devices, personal accounts could potentially be subject to PRA. In fact, I know that they're subject to PRA to the extent that those personal devices were used to transmit information and data related to city business. So that is something to be mindful of. I'm not aware, were you commissioners provided email addresses? Is that, no, go. So no email, please. Mm-hmm. The portions of those phones potentially that received items related to city business. Yeah. I mean, that is something to be cognizant of, that the PRA is alive and well, the Public Records Act, and to the extent that somebody requested that information, I mean, it is possible. It is possible. Now, again, not dispensing legal advice here, but it doesn't mean that they have access to the entirety of your phone and your email address. It's narrowed to what it is that you said or what you transmitted related to city business. So just know that.
real quick question on that. Someone would have to have cause, correct? I mean, I just could not request his cell phone data because I think he emailed somebody else, correct? You would need some sort of cause, wouldn't you?
Vice Chair, I am not admittedly, I'm not an expert on the PRA. I don't have too much experience with it. I do know that the requests come frequently. But I simply don't have an answer for that at this time. I can look into it if you'd like. And if you'd like, you can certainly shoot me an email. Yeah. Okay.
Can I give one last hypothetical real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
Let's say there's a local organization out there and they are holding a workshop on why they believe police officers should be wearing pink. And let's say that for wearing pink uniforms. And let's suppose that 4 commissioners show up to the workshop, but they don't say anything. They just show up and the workshop is just we need our police officers to wear pink uniforms. Is that a violation of the Brown Act?
Is this workshop you're describing open to the public?
Yes.
Okay. So if it's completely and entirely open to the public, and that again, it'll come into an exception. One of the exceptions is that as long as the 4 commissioners do not discuss business and they're attending an event or a seminar that is 100% open to the public, then they could attend. That would fall under an exception.
Okay, thank you.
All right, just trying to reorient. So face-to-face gatherings only, I think we've touched about this. That was a face-to-face gatherings only with a question mark. Actually, you know what? I hit this already. Brown Act requires local government business to be conducted at open and public meetings. This applies to government bodies of local agency and any commission like this one, committee or board that is created by formal action of the city council. So again, that's exactly like this body. So we know the Brown Act applies. This does not apply. So here's an exception for Brown Act. One of the exceptions is it does not apply to ad hoc meetings with less than a quorum. So to talk about a few of those. You have 2 scenarios whereby there could be meetings with less than a quorum that occur. You have a standing committee. A standing committee is put together based on, so it would be 3. It would be 3 members of this body. It is continuing subject matter. It has no end date, so it exists in perpetuity. So it has no end date with longevity. That particular committee would be subject to the Brown Act. Even though it only would have 3 members, it's still going to be subject to the Brown Act. And part of the reason is because there is no end date. It is just existing and moving forward into perpetuity. Now, it could potentially be ended at some point, but that would take formal action. The next scenario, and more interestingly, is what's called the ad hoc committee. Now, an ad hoc committee would also consist of 3 or even potentially 2 of you, but it would be less than a quorum. And that is created for a specific task, for a specific situation. That exists for a short defined period of time. That ad hoc committee is dissolved immediately upon the completion of the task that it was assigned. And that particular ad hoc committee, that committee is not subject to the Brown Act. So that is one of those few exceptions. That one's not going to be subject to the Brown Act. Brown Act does not apply to individual contacts between a member body and any other person. For example, conference call or telephone call or other conversation with any other person, including staff, constituents, press, etc. So again, I think I mentioned briefly, like nothing prohibits one of you commissioners picking up the phone and calling another commissioner. Nothing prohibits one of you commissioners picking up the phone and calling acting deputy chief, calling one of your constituents, talking about business. That is absolutely acceptable, and it happens all the time. The issue again, and we'll get into it, and I'm really just hammering this home, is this idea of the serial meetings, and that's where this can become problematic. And we get into it here, but individual contacts cannot be used to do in stages what would be prohibited in one step. This is the concept of the serial meeting. Under the Brown Act, a majority of the members of a legislative body shall not, outside a meeting, use a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item of business that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. This is all in an effort to not develop what we have here called a collective concurrence. What are the problems with serial meetings? It deprives the public of an opportunity to observe and participating in decision-making. Remember, everything is supposed to be open and public. This is transparent government. These serial meetings may occur by what we call either a daisy chain method or a hub and spoke. A daisy chain method is kind of this, it was actually the scenario I described earlier. Member A contacts member B, who then contacts member C, who then contacts member D, until a quorum has discussed and taken action on an item. That's what we call a daisy chain. It's just a game of telephone. Other one that we commonly see is called a hub and spoke. And that is essentially Commissioner A acts as the information sharer, right? And so Commissioner A then contacts B, and then Commissioner A contacts C, Commissioner A contacts D, and that's the hub and spoke method. Both of those are obviously prohibited under the act and should be avoided at all costs. It is a serial meeting and it violates the Brown Act, and it again violates the idea of open government. Picture here, if that helps.
So I think as good practice, whenever a commissioner does reach out to someone else, if that other commissioner decides to reach to another one, it's probably good practice to say, I've already spoken this to somebody else. So you can't now talk to anyone else about this subject. And just for sake of transparency and being able to avoid a Brown Act violation.
And the idea too is to not share the thoughts of another commissioner. That's kind of where the problem comes in, right? Because that's where the daisy chain or the hub and spoke is working, is that a commissioner is contacts one. They develop a concurrence, then contacts another one and says, hey, I got A on board, or I got B on board. Now I'm going to try and get C on board. And then A then contacts D and says, hey, I got A, B, and C on board now. So he's using the opinions and the thoughts from the other commissioners to build his or her case and kind of get that concurrence they're looking for. So it's important that the thoughts and the ideas of the other commissioners you've been speaking to are not shared. It's that if you're going to share an idea, it's your idea that you're sharing. It's not the other commissioner's ideas, because then you're establishing potentially the concurrence.
Right.
Direct contacts about city business with fellow members are the clearest means by which a serial meeting can occur. If one is touching on what we talked about, if one participant discloses the views of the other participant to a third or fourth member, a serial meeting results. And that's kind of what I was talking about, is it's sharing, hey, we're building this coalition because B and C think like we do, or think like I do, join us in thinking the same way. And that really truly is the issue, because now you're discussing city business. You're just doing it in a way that you're just building one off the other. And I think really at the heart of all of this is the best way to avoid any issues is to just refrain from discussing agency business with a quorum or sharing views of others outside meetings. So we've really been talking about, well, how do you avoid a serial meeting? What are the ways, I don't want to say get around it, but like how it's not about how close can you get to a serial meeting before being a serial meeting. The real best practice should be just don't discuss city business unless you're here at the dais, or you're in some other forum where the public can access. Because the seven of you can have the exact same conversations you would have in private right up here on this dais. You don't necessarily need to be on the phone with each other. You don't need to be sending emails. There are exceptions and there are ways, again, to avoid the serial meeting, but I really believe from a best practice, it's just do it up here, right here on the dais where the cameras can film it and record it and the public has the ability to talk to you about it. And that's really, I think, what we should strive for.
Question. Let's say two commissioners get invited to speak at a neighborhood meeting or to attend at an event, an educational event. That will still be within what is allowed, right?
Commissioner Pereira, did you say that two council members were invited to a community?
No, let's say two commissioners from this body are invited to an event, to a conversation, educational conversation, because it's two commissioners, still allowable, or is that not allowable? Because I can see, different neighborhood groups, organizations wanting to be engaged with different members of of this body. And so I think understanding what the parameters are for us and that will be helpful too.
Sure. And thank you for the question. Two commissioners attending a event that you've described is perfectly permissible under the Brown Act. And I think that I know that the city council members that appointed you and the city would encourage the commissioners in this body to attend those types of events, to engage with the public and to listen to what the public has to say and to be a part of the community in that way. I know that council would greatly appreciate that, and I think they probably envisioned that. So in no way do we want to discourage that at the city attorney's office. We just want to make sure that it's happening within the confines of the Brown Act. So what you've described, Commissioner, would be permissible.
Excuse me, I have a question on that, and it's a rather convoluted, so bear with me. I know there's council members and commissioners on other committees that are involved in other organizations, and those organizations talk to each other. So I'm in an organization and I express my opinion about what's going on here. And people from that other organization are there, and some of those are commissioners or council people or what have you. It gets rather convoluted when you start to see how this information can be relayed from one commissioner to another through these other bodies that are outside of this dais. So to me, that seems to be a little bit problematic, and I don't know how you get around that.
Yes, Vice Chair, that is a good point and it's a good question. And I did not think it was convoluted at all. Nothing prohibits you from sharing your opinion in other spaces. So please, I want everybody to understand that you're perfectly permitted to do that. And so to the extent that your opinion becomes circulated through no manufacturing of your own, that can't be helped. That's just living in society, right? Like somebody's going to take your words and they're going to turn around and tell somebody else, and that person's going to tell somebody else, and that's just life. And so I think the Brown Act envisions that's a possibility. So to the extent you've shared your opinion with somebody, and it circulates, again, I think the intent is a big part of this, is that was there an intent to manufacture a quorum? And if you're sharing your opinion with an outside entity, or commissioners from other bodies or elected officials from other bodies, that's not what's envisioned within the Brown Act. It's really are you sharing your opinion in an improper way with the members of this body and attempting to establish a concurrence with this body?
Excellent. That really kind of sums it up for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
I don't want anybody to think that their opinions can't be shared. Now, I would walk that back slightly and just remind the commissioners about closed session. And so closed session items, to the extent they're discussed, are confidential. Sometimes they'll involve personnel matters. Sometimes they'll involve pending litigation. So those items, we would ask that opinions not be shared outside of the four corners of the closed session chambers back there. True. That is true. Yep. Yes, absolutely.
Referring to saying Joe Burrow, but you say how late the behavior will be about that, or are you referring to getting up in front of the Conway meeting and speaking about what you're doing, about what we're doing?
A similar scenario to that where, because there obviously people have lives outside of here and they're in other organizations, they're in other committees or what have you. So I'm invited to the committee or this organization I happen to be a part of, and I make my position very well known. People from other organizations that are affiliated with that organization are there and they hear my opinion. And this could be, and what seems to be problematic for me is this could be something that's upcoming that would be discussed here. So in essence, you've made a public discussion, not necessarily intending to create a meeting, but through the grapevine and through these people participating in these organizations, in essence, there has been a meeting, if that makes sense. Now, I fully appreciate what you're saying about being in front of Comlink. That I don't see a conflict with personally, because again, you're just speaking at a public meeting. And the only thing I could see would be a problem if we were all there, right? Then I could see, that's according to what I'm hearing there, that could be an issue. And I think you would have to have the discretion to say, hey, I'm sorry, I can't speak, or leave. So that's my concern.
Could be green.
The first, I got too much on that. And Carl comes to me right away. That would not be proper, I would say.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, can you?
We're dealing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Dealing it. Mike thinks if they gave, but often didn't wear it that day. Had a problem because he went against orders, okay? I expressed that at the meeting, and Carl said, the bench had one time, what's new? You know. Problem. Okay, now, that should stay here, I would think. I would never do that again. I just give you an example.
Yeah,
That should stay here, not be out to the public, I would think.
as general best practices, possibly, but we're kind of, I think, in some regards, we're moving aside from the Brown Act provisions in the sense of what constitutes a meeting, and are we dealing in a meeting versus best practices in terms of, disclosing potentially sensitive information, confidential information. I'm not, and that is just going to be on a case by case basis, whether we're there. But what, again, this harkens all the way back to the beginning, I think, of this presentation, is the operative question is there a meeting? If there's not a meeting, then the Brown Act does not apply. And so going to Vice Chair Carpenter's hypothetical, something is said to somebody, not even on this commission, he says something to somebody else, and it spreads like wildfire. Even if it makes it to this entire body, by virtue of email or Facebook or what have you. There's not been a meeting because there was not a majority of this body that collectively got together to formulate an opinion and discuss business. So I hope that I'm addressing that kind of the way that makes sense to everybody. That is correct, Commissioner. I think what is kind of complicated it, and that is absolutely the foundational question. I think what has complicated it is the concept of the serial meeting. The serial meeting has complicated the discussion because it gives rise to so many hypotheticals. And that's why we really recommend that the city attorney's office, from just a baseline, that's why I suggested just perhaps avoid discussing business with anybody outside of this dais. Is that if you made that your baseline policy, you'll never violate the Brown Act, ever. You won't have a serial meeting. You won't engage in conduct that again would violate the Brown Act. If you discuss business here in these chambers every time, you'll never violate the Brown Act because everything else is going to be taken care of. Staff does a wonderful job getting the video equipment running. They have a wonderful job taking public comment. They have a wonderful job opening the doors up and making sure that the public's present. So we handle everything on that end, and all the commissioners have to do is discuss your business here on this dais. Brown Act will be satisfied every time. I promise you. This is an important one, and this is an important concept. Members of this body may consult with city staff outside of a meeting for questions or information about a matter. Okay, so Commissioner Perea, he absolutely could contact Mr. Soto with a question. He can contact Mr. Soto about specific information related to an upcoming agenda. Any of you could contact me if you had a question, again, pertaining to certain information about a matter, if it were legal in nature. So that is absolutely permitted. I don't think that anything there was going to give rise to a serial meeting because you're contacting staff. So just know, but the real issue becomes, it's like the contacting staff from a policy perspective. So it's that staff is available to help guide you in terms of questions you need addressed, information you need addressed, again, to discuss up here or help you do your jobs as a commissioner, not to discuss policy with. And so that's where we just need to be careful. It's not that somebody's going to buzz me and say, I'm thinking about voting this way. And, do you think that's going to go over well with the rest of the commissioners? And how do you think I should go about doing it? That's a policy consideration. And so just if you are going to contact staff, which I know you've already been communicating with Mr. Soto, just please make sure that it really is, it's narrowly tailored to, it's tailored to information about potentially procedure, or information related to just specifics about an agenda item or something along those lines. That is really that is really how we want you contacting staff. Staff and commissioners should be very careful not to disclose the comments or position of any other member. Again, and I know Mr. Soto is very well versed in this. He's not going to relay positions to anybody. Staff is not going to relay positions to anybody. I certainly would not. But again, we're worrying about that serial meeting occur. Worrying about that facilitating a collective concurrence outside of a noticed and open meeting, and it would result in a Brown Act violation. Okay. Now, here's the moment you've all been waiting for. These are the exceptions to the Brown Act. So if a majority of this body were to be present anywhere, whether it's a virtual or live space, this is the space, these are the spaces in which that could occur. So seminars and conferences open to the public and of general interest, community meetings that are open and publicized, meetings of other legislative bodies. So if 4 of you were to attend our next city council meeting, and would be sitting somewhere out there in the gallery, that would not be a violation because again, it is another legislative body, being the city council for Santa Ana. Social or ceremonial occasions, I kind of gave an example of that, like a groundbreaking or something that were occurring in the city that were of significance and ceremonial interest. And there is a caveat that if a majority are present at any of these, we know that you cannot discuss any items of city business or else a meeting would result. Yes, absolutely. Mhm.
I did to a meeting. I always have the excuse that, oh, we can't come, right? I invited, say, number one.
Mhm.
Okay, then I invited them. Also, this topic tonight involves all 3 of these areas of town. So let's have the council member from each area come and listen to the questions and concerns. Oh, can't come because it's Brown Act.
Mhm.
So
If the meeting, you said Comlink, was it a Comlink meeting?
communication,
If it were a Comlink meeting that was open and publicized to the entire public, that it was not restricted in any way, that anybody could show up, then there theoretically should not be a Brown Act violation, provided that majority did not discuss city business.
sorry, but oh, can't do it.
Well, I can't necessarily speak to that though, Commissioner, because there could be other Brown Act violations potentially inherent in that. I don't know. But just from this perspective and this overview, it provided what you're telling me is accurate in terms of the availability of the public to attend, then it would seem to fit the parameters of what's acceptable under the Brown Act. Here or there, I've heard it come up time to time.
But that's what we like to have our city council. Well, now, there's a question right there. I'm asked, Carl right now is Carl Benninger right now. They come to that meeting.
I would definitely call them police oversight commissioners. Yeah, yeah, I think police commissioner may actually be a rank, so
Yeah.
we want to be careful on that. You know? So I'm sorry, was there a question?
Could I do that? Yes. Is that possible for me to do that?
To invite, provided 2 things, and I think you've already touched on one, Commissioner, is that provided that meeting is open and public and anybody could attend. And when I say anybody, I mean anybody. They could attend. And no city business was discussed amongst those that majority of commissioners, then they could attend. Yes. I'm sorry, can you repeat that one time? Mm-hmm.
They would not apply.
Yes, because if business were discussed, then it would be violating the Brown Act, and the exceptions would not apply.
And so my question,
Correct.
so then what?
Because the general prohibition is that a meeting occurs when a majority of the commissioners are present in one space. And the Brown Act goes on to say, and they discuss city business. But I believe from a presumptive level, it's that if a majority are present, then the potential, I think the presumption is that they did discuss business. And so that's why we say from a best practices standpoint, just to avoid having a majority of council members or commissioners present in one space. Yes, yes.
And
I believe it does. But I can get some clarity on that.
that would be great. But if that president, someone then file Brown Act violation, and then if it's
Understood.
I think it's
Sure, I understand that.
Can I ask a question? Thank you.
Yes.
What's the procedure just to use the restroom? Do we just get up and go?
Yeah, no, we can. So you want to?
Commissioner Said, of course, you may exit the dais to use the restroom or take a quick break. The meeting will presume so long as there is a quorum
Okay.
at the dais, so as long as there are at least 4 commissioners, the meeting will proceed. If at any time 3 or more than 3 commissioners exit the dais, the meeting will pause until quorum returns.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Soto, I wouldn't mind taking a 5-minute break anyways.
Chair, would you like to call for a quick recess?
Yes. I am recessing this meeting and we will return in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I don't have to repeat everything, you know. I hope I don't have to repeat everything, do I? Oh, my God. Yes, sir. Oh,
You're on.
This meeting is resumed. The time is 6:42 PM. We are continuing with item 3. Commissioners, I would like to suggest that we hold off our questions until the very end, so that way we can hear the entire presentation.
Thank you, everybody. So moving on to goal number 2 that we discussed at the beginning, it is this is just going to be a brief overview, and I think and maybe somebody can correct me or Mr. Soto can, because I was not here for the first oversight meeting. I just wanted to go over a little meeting procedures. If this is redundant or this has already been discussed, please let me know. Otherwise, I think it would be helpful just to touch on them. Some of this stuff I understand. We already have a chairperson, we already have a vice chair that is laid out, but just if you could bear with me, we'll get through it quickly. We have the chairperson is elected by the commission. We know this, we've done it. The chairperson shall have the responsibility for informing the city council of commission actions or inactions and the reasons therefore. Basic format for discussing agenda items. First is the chair announces agenda item and clearly states the subject. Chair Vega, you've been doing a great job so far, so I know you know how to do that. Second, chair invites presentation of the staff report on the item, including any recommendations. I don't believe we've really gotten into the point where there's staff reports yet. When the independent oversight director is selected and a management analyst is assigned to that independent oversight director, you'll start seeing things potentially like staff reports and other staff items that are going to be coming to you in the agenda packet. Until that period of time, you're probably not going to be seeing too many staff reports, although it's possible. So just please understand what that really means in the context of that when I say staff report and the presentation of those staff reports. Sorry. Third, chair asks commissioners if they have questions on an item for clarification. Fourth, chair invites public comment on the item if it is on the agenda and being heard as a public hearing. All public comment on the respective item is heard at this time, and then public hearing is closed by the chair. If the matter is not on the agenda as a public hearing, any member of the public can speak about it in the general public comment period preceding the business agenda. Public comment may be limited to 3 minutes for each speaker. At the end of public comments, chair should announce that the public input has concluded. Fifth, chair invites a motion on an item and announces the name of the commissioner making the motion. Chair invites a second to the motion and announces the name of that commissioner who seconds. Seventh, after the motion is made and seconded, chair repeats the motion or asks the maker of the motion or the commission secretary to repeat it. Eighth, chair invites discussion of the motion. If lengthy discussion occurs, the chair should repeat the motion to make sure everyone understands it. Ninth, chair asks for a vote on the item. A, nay, or abstain. 10th, chair announces the result of the vote and what action, if any, the commission has taken. That's just, again, a little broad stroke kind of overview of the step-by-step process by which this body will hear agenda items, make motions, and the process that it should roughly look like every time. And I think that this would be most helpful for Chair Vega to review that. I think that hopefully it'll help you just navigate the process, because there is a lot of steps to it. There is one topic I wanted to touch on that's not in the PowerPoints, and it is the discussion of non-agenda items. So it's very important that, again, going back to the idea of open and transparent government, that the Brown Act requires, again, when there is a meeting, that there be an agenda, and that the agenda set forth exactly what the body is going to discuss and deliberate at the next meeting. And that is what gives the public the opportunity to comment, the opportunity to weigh in, to provide their opinion, is that agenda. There is a very, very limited circumstances by which this body can stray from that agenda and discuss items that aren't on it. And there are two exceptions. It is pursuant to Government Code 5494.2. And the two exceptions are this. The first is if the body determines by majority vote that an emergency situation exists. The term emergency is limited to work stoppages or crippling type disasters. That really is probably something you're going to see with city council. This particular body dealing with work stoppages or disasters of any sort is probably something that's not going to come up. So that, but I did want to set forth that as one potential way by which this body could discuss something that's not agendized. And it's that the first one is that emergency exception. The second exception, which may potentially come up, is if the body finds by 2/3 vote of those present, or if less than 2/3 of the body is present by unanimous vote, that there is a need to take immediate action on an item. And here's the important part, is that the need for action came to the attention of the local agency subsequent to the posting of the agenda. So there's a lot of hurdles to be cleared here with this one. You're going to need a 2/3 vote or a unanimous vote if 2/3 aren't present. You're going to need it to be a piece of material that requires immediate action, meaning it could not wait until the next meeting. It has to be dealt with now. And lastly, this need came to the attention of this body after the agenda was posted. And oftentimes that's kind of the hardest barrier to overcome, because if this body knew, or if a portion of this body knew of this issue before the agenda was posted, the thought being is that commissioner should have agendized the item. And it should be something then, again, that the public can weigh in on. So there are a lot of barriers to clear with that potential, but it is there, and it is a potential avenue if we needed to go down, if the situation arose. I have a little something in here about amending motions. I can just leave as is. All these materials are going to be available to you commissioners, so it's self-explanatory there in the amending motions. Really same with the next slide, which is reconsidering motions. If anybody has any questions on those, though, please feel free to ask me. It's no problem, or you can email me and I can provide a response. Talk just a little bit about public participation. Brown Act requires two types of public comment periods: general audience public comment, during which public may comment on any non-agenda item. The second way is comments pertaining to specific agenda items, which must be heard prior to consideration of the item. So generally, if any of you commissioners have seen our city council operate, you'll see that there is that general comment period, and then it's followed by the business calendar, which then will elicit public comment based on those particular items. That's typically the way that public comment would transpire, and it's the preferred format. It's not set in stone that it has to occur that specific way. The Brown Act just does require that there be two types of public comment: general and then specific. Discussion of non-agenda items. And I think we talked about, I did bring up the limited exceptions. I brought up the limited exceptions in the context of that emergency or the issue that arose after posting of the agenda. There are a few other things that can be discussed outside of those agendized items. Commissioners may briefly respond to public comment or questions and provide a referral to staff or other resources. Commissioners may ask questions for clarification. Commissioners may report on his or her own activities. And commissioners may request staff to report back on a matter or a particular issue. All right, and moving on now to my last goal of the evening, goal 3, strategize on how to implement best practices. I think you kind of just see in American politics right now, we really are living in a bit of a wild time. And so I really like to start this particular goal by talking about just courtesy and decorum. I think everybody here on this dais and everybody in this room wants what's best for the city of Santa Ana and for its residents, and for its employees and for police and staff. And I think everybody is trying to drive towards a communal goal. And that is truly what is best for the city residents, like I said, staff, making this city the best city in the state of California. And it can start here. It can start here, and it can start in our legislative bodies when we think about courtesy and we think about decorum and the respect that we all need to show each other. So just kind of starting with that, it should be noted, really, we're looking for one commissioner to have the floor at any given time. So we're not speaking over each other. We're not arguing with each other. We're not having shouting matches. The chair first recognizes each speaker. The discussion focuses on an agenda item, not on personalities. The chair has the right to cut off discussion that is too personal, too loud, or rude. So that's you, Chair Vega. You have that responsibility there. Maintaining civility in meetings. Please do not attack or question the motives of other members. Limit misunderstandings to the extent possible. Really try to ascertain the facts. Again, when I just kind of brought up, I think the culture that we live in, especially with the way our politics work and what we see on television, is I think a lot of times misunderstandings and the arguments that we have with others, a lot of times are a product of not really taking the time to gather facts and not taking the time to understand those and process that. And so I like to put in here, really try to get to the bottom of facts. Not so much opinions, but actual facts, concrete data that you can use to shape your opinions and the way that we interact with each other up here. Please use a fair process. Listen with an open mind and focus discussion on the agenda item. We're humans, and it becomes easy to stray from an agenda item and to go down another rabbit hole or another path. So please try to always redirect or refocus on an agenda item. And Chair Vega, that will also be a duty that you may find yourself having to enforce when it becomes necessary. A few pointers and tips. Please do not engage in two-way dialogue with the audience. Please prepare in advance of the meeting by reviewing the agenda and staff reports when you start seeing staff reports. If you have a specific question or concern, please contact staff in advance of the meeting so they can prepare to address them at the meeting or provide clarification to you. That is why staff is here. Out of this. Closing comments. Please, commissioners, enjoy your time. As a commissioner, you do provide a valuable service to the city council, to the staff, and to this community as a whole. And it is a public service each of you are undertaking up here. And I know, speaking from myself, city attorney's office, other staff, city council, we're very much have a lot of gratitude for what you're doing up here, and we're very gracious for that. So thank you. And if there's any other questions or any concerns, please, I'd be happy to address now.
Thank you, Assistant City Attorney Martinez. So in the interest of, in spirit of courtesy and decorum, I'm gonna go ahead and call on each commissioner and allow you to ask all the questions that you would like to ask. And then when you're done, I'll move on to the next one. So that way we're not bouncing back and forth. Who would like to speak first?
Are you just asking about questions on what was presented?
Yes.
Okay, no, I have no question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Perea.
Thank you. I have a question regarding agendizing discussions. The first one is, can any member of the commission request for a certain topic or matter to be discussed at a following meeting, whether it is, via meeting here in person, whether it's via email, and what's kind of like the procedure for that?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Perea. I would defer to Mr. Soto on that question just for let me answer your question. Yes, any commissioner can request that an item be agendized. Regarding the procedure for that, I would defer and ask Mr. Soto to just weigh in on exactly how that procedure would look.
Thank you, Commissioner Perea and Assistant City Attorney Martinez. I'll need to review Rosenberg's Rules of Order, which outlines the procedures for our public meetings. I'll say generally, for example, during your commissioner comments, you're able to make suggestions for items to be added to the agenda. Ultimately, staff prepares the agenda for every single meeting. For these first 3 meetings that we've had, that responsibility has fallen on me. So I've been adding those agenda items. So I would still invite you to share those recommendations during your commissioner comments. As far as the specifics go, I will review the Rosenberg's Rules of Orders and get back to you on the exact procedures on how those items will be added to our future meeting agendas.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have questions regarding the Brown Act training? No? Okay. Thank you again, Assistant City Attorney Martinez, for that. So that concludes the business calendar. We're going to move on now to comments, starting with comments from staff.
Thank you, Chair Vega. We don't have any staff comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to commissioner comments. Do any commissioners want to give closing comments? Go ahead, Vice Chair.
First of all, I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody. We're not going to be here for that day, so Merry Christmas on that. And again, thank you to the staff and thank you to the police department. I'm very excited about this. I think it's great that you guys are doing that. It looks very comprehensive and I think it'll be good for all of us. I did have some requests for information that I had sent and you was instructed to bring it up at this time. So I will do that right now. I would like to get demographics of the city by age, ethnicity, and sex by ward if possible. Demographics of the police field officers by age, ethnicity, sex, and years of service. And arrest records by ward, again, age, sex, and ethnicity. And again, Merry Christmas to everybody, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Gorski.
Push button speak, okay. Is it possible to get a calendar of the city's, what do you call it, city meetings, I guess, that they have, to let us know which Fridays, City Hall is not open?
Yes, Commissioner Gorski, we'll get that information to you and
Thank
the
you.
other commissioners.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Mejia.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the data that I had requested on the first meeting to see if there's an update on that and for it to be individual level data. Also, if we can have an update on when the link to the website will be enabled for residents to submit complaints, which hasn't taken place, at least the last time I checked. And I also just kind of want to remind everyone, I kind of heard a couple of times some folks mention police commission and not police oversight. And just a reminder, we are a police oversight commission. And just, to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Perea?
Thank you, Chair Vega. First, I wanted to say, if follow up again on on some of the data that I requested around is settlements, the cost of settlements since 2010. I think it complements with also with some of the data that my fellow commissioners are asking. So maybe that could be an item for discussion in general, just some overview around some demographics, issues, data that the staff might think might be permanent for the commissioners to understand, to how to get an overview, overview of policing in the city. And then with the second one, happy holidays to everyone and happy new year. And we have a lot going on in the world. And one of the things that I keep in mind a lot is the current issue of Gaza and what's happening with Palestine. So definitely taking that to heart as we celebrate the holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Said, any closing comments?
It's been a pleasure so far, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Castillo-Lawton, any closing comments?
No closing comments.
Great, thank you. So I'll give my closing comments. I do also want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a safe and fun New Year's. One thing that I would like to see come back as an agenda item is I feel like 72 hours is not enough. When we get the agenda, and especially if we have attachments, I want to be able to explore if we can maybe extend that time so that we can get a little bit earlier. If we can add that to the agenda. Other than that, that is all the comments that I have. With no further business before the commission, I hereby adjourn the commission meeting. The time is 7:04 p.m. The next meeting of the Police Oversight Commission is scheduled for January 11th, 2024 at 5 p.m.